Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to go through some more viewers' questions. Again, not done this for a while, so I asked for a load on the community page, and on this one it's really talking about the potential future democratic reforms that could happen in the UK, let's say over the next generation. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, of course, when you're in a situation where democracy is crumbling in your country, inevitably people look at the what led us here, because effectively it's the current democratic process that led us here, and how could we change it to have avoided this. Obviously, proportional representation is the obvious one there. Now, the first sort of question on this one, someone was saying, is there support in the country for proportional representation? And then same question about local devolution. Because in terms of electoral reform, I would be heavily supportive of both of these measures. Proportional representation, incredibly important. We've actually seen when it comes to devolution that a central government can still rein back powers. Whether it can do so lawfully or constitutionally is another matter, but then if they also knacker the courts, difficult to say on that one. But for proportional representation, first of all, because that would have made the extreme government that we have right now impossible. And in terms of the first past the post against proportional representation, we'll first of all tackle what first past the post stalwarts would say is the benefit of the current system. So they will note that what it means is that you will have a representative in your local area, and that representative will back you on local matters. They will fight for your local priorities. And of course, you know, with proportional representation, that would be less true, because you'll have whole regions, and it may well be that your nearest... I mean, the whole idea with proportional representation in terms of benefits, of course, is you may not have an MP really close to you, but you will have an MP who belongs to a party you generally approve of fairly close to you. In some parts of the country, let's say you're a Conservative supporter, but actually that's a bad example at the moment. We'll have to do it the other way around. I'm sorry. Let's say you're a Labour supporter. There are parts of the country that you can live where there won't be a Labour MP for 100 miles or more. Whereas under proportional representation, there would be Labour MPs in every region. So if you wish to engage with them, because sometimes, you know, I urge people to engage with MPs of parties they don't approve of, absolutely. But realistically, you know, you're not going to make as big an impact doing that, because they're straight away not on the same page as you. It's much better to be able to talk to an MP who's in roughly the same place as you are. But first past the post, they say the benefit is this local MP who can back your local matters. To which I would say, okay, so let's look at how these local MPs have been behaving in 2020. So we've already had Conservative MPs in agricultural constituencies vote to allow American farmers to completely undercut them. In other words, to export lower quality agricultural products to the UK, but they're not going to be allowed to lower their standards, which means they'll be undercut. Agricultural businesses around the country are dead against the agriculture bill that has been supported by many of their own MPs. So they weren't really backing local matters there, were they? What were they backing? The party line. Then we've got the fact that they've also voted to remove themselves from scrutinisation of trade deals. So the government are now conducting trade deals largely in secret. We've signed now a trade deal with Japan. Every time some more details emerge, it looks worse and worse and worse. And yet the full thing still hasn't been published. MPs still do not fully know what's in it. So how on earth can they back their local area when they have no say? And it's not even no say, they don't even have any sort of oversight over the negotiating process. They're not going to even find out the full details of what's in a deal until it has all been signed, and even then it's not happening straight away. So again, how is that backing up your local area? I'm not really sure it is. Then you've had Conservative MPs again in poorer constituencies, high levels of child poverty, voting to prevent those children from being fed properly over Christmas. Some of them even had the nerve to vote against feeding them over Christmas and then complain that the government's policy is wrong. I mean, you won the one you just voted for. So do you know what? I'm not really going to buy the notion that first past the post gives you an MP who will back your local matters. Some of them do. Many of them do. But many of them do not. Many of them will toe the party line. That is the bottom line. So that argument doesn't wash. So in terms of proportional representation, major benefits, of course. First of all, the current government could not exist. We simply do not get in the UK parties winning power with a majority of votes. It doesn't happen. I'm not saying it never could happen, but it doesn't happen. Hasn't happened in my lifetime, has it? So you end up with a situation where a party that wins a minority of votes gets all of the power. All of the power. If Conservative MPs want to vote for a thing, it goes through. All of the other parties added together, which represents in excess of 50% of the population. In fact, the MPs in Parliament that are not Conservative MPs represent 57% effectively. It's a little less than 57% because there were some votes that went to parties that didn't gain any MPs in reality. But it is significantly over 50%, more over 50% than the Brexit win, for example. And yet they cannot stop it. These MPs who represent more voters than the Conservatives cannot stop the Conservatives. It's inherently undemocratic. With proportional representation, you would have to have coalitions forming under these circumstances. If a party cannot win more than 50% of the votes, then it cannot govern consistently without support from other parties. It would have to work together. Or it would have to earn the trust of the public to get the in excess of 50% of the votes. So there is the benefit there. And as I said, what it means is also your vote always counts. Tactical voting needn't happen, which is just as well, because it doesn't bloody well happen well enough. It hasn't happened for years. We tried a little bit of it in 2019, not enough engaged in it. Okay, unfortunately, it didn't have enough political leadership for that. 2024, hopefully there will be a big leaning onto tactical voting, just like there was in 1997. We will have to wait and see on that one, but it shouldn't be necessary. You should be able to vote for the party or the candidate that most matches your priorities without feeling that you are wasting your vote. Because you can have a situation with the current system where, you know, I'm a Labour supporter. I could easily, in fact, actually, do you know what? I'm moving to an area that's Conservative. So I could, but let's imagine I lived in an area which was Conservative, but the candidate that had the best chance of winning or beating the Conservative would be a Liberal Democrat, but I'm a Labour supporter. So what do I do? If I vote Labour, actually I'm helping the Conservative candidate, because the only candidate that could actually get enough votes to beat them is the Liberal Democrat. So I could vote for the Liberal Democrat candidate and help to beat the Conservative candidate, judging that I'd rather a Liberal Democrat MP than a Conservative MP, but then I'm not voting for the party that I'm sufficiently supportive of that I pay membership fees to. It's a ridiculous scenario. I've been quite fortunate in that every general election it has been the sensible choice for me to vote Labour. But I recognise that that's luck, not any cunning on my part. That's just happened to be where I have lived. So proportional representation, of course, has to be the key here. In terms of, is there support for it? Yes and no is what I'd say. Or yes and don't know, actually, is a more accurate answer. You can always find polls, quick scan, yes, you can find polls, up-to-date polls that show support for proportional representation. Absolutely. Does that mean that were there to be a referendum on it that the public would back proportional representation? We cannot say that. I would like to think that's true. I believe it probably would be true. We cannot say that. And the reason I say that is as follows. Until there has been a public debate on exactly what form it will take, you can't be sure. The other thing is this, because there isn't that public debate in there, people can obviously see the benefits of proportional representation, but There are an awful lot of people and a large chunk of the media that have a vested interest in first past the post remaining the choice for deciding governments. They will swing into action, just like with Brexit. They will swing into action and they will try and cajole the public into voting against proportional representation. You can't discount that. At the moment, they're not doing that because it's not a serious threat. And it will not be a serious threat. I am hoping in a few years' time, Labour realise that the only way they can win power, and this is why I think proportional representation really can happen now, if there was a silver lining at all to what has happened last December, it is that Labour are in such a desperate position now. Winning power is almost impossible in itself. And the reason I say that, let us imagine that Labour gained a number of MPs that Labour last gained in 1997, a swing that large. That technically would give Labour a majority, so Labour would form a government. However, it would be a very small majority, and the problem with a small majority is it gives an incredible amount of power to individual backbench MPs. Now, in theory, that's not a bad thing. Again, when it comes to those local issues, not a bad thing. In practice, however, it means that the party leadership can get no coordinated programme of policies in place, because there will always be some MPs who decide it's not in their interest, whether it's their personal politics, which they really shouldn't be bringing in too much as an MP, or whether they are back in their local areas and it's not great for their local area. And it'll be one of these things where you can't please everyone and therefore you'll never get your votes in without having to work with another party. Labour are in the position where they're going to look, best case scenario, needing to work with other parties in order to get a working majority, which is more than a simple majority. That is likely to mean they're going to need to promise proportional representation as a firm manifesto pledge for two reasons. One, if they do that, then they will get the support of other parties because it's in those parties' interests as well, or some of them. The other thing is thinking about the way people would vote as well. So, and I've said this before, if you were a Liberal Democrat voter or a Green Party voter, SNP, probably less so because you do quite well at the moment, Plaid Cymru, any sort of fringe parties that maybe don't get any MPs, and you were looking ahead at the next election going, if Labour win, if Labour can win power, we're going to get proportional representation, after which I can vote for the party of my choice in future general elections and my vote will not be wasted. We'll see multiple Green Party MEPs, dozens of Liberal Democrat MPs. I said MEPs then. I'm getting ahead of myself. MPs, sorry. And so on. You know, the smaller parties would become larger parties. Coalitions would form. Politics would become more moderated. That's an attractive prospect. So you go, right, just this once, I'd normally vote Green Party or Liberal Democrat or whoever, just this once I'll vote Labour to get this across the line. Now, in terms of local devolution, that's the other question here. Would there be support for this? I think for this, definitely. Absolutely. Brexit, for a lot of people, there's a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But again, polling results showed a number of reasons for voting Brexit. For a lot of people, arguably definitely the same thing for some people in terms of the increase in support for Scottish independence, for example. It's the simple fact that you're not being heard. You've got your local, regional, whatever matters, and they're being ignored. Sometimes it's a perception, sometimes it's absolutely true, being ignored by a national government. You want your own local government. You're quite happy to have a national government that deals with national matters, but there are only so many of those. You would like a local government that deals with regional issues. And we don't really have that in England, which is where the support for Brexit was strong. But you'd need further devolution everywhere else as well. But in England, it's really bad. It's really far behind. And the reason, I suppose, is because Westminster has always been seen, wrongly really, for centuries, as the English Parliament. People will say, for example, that, well, you do have English-only matters decided. They're decided by your MPs. But here is the problem. Let us compare it with, say, the Scottish Parliament. Now, if I was living in Scotland I could say to myself, do you know what? I support Scottish independence, so I will vote for the SNP in Westminster elections. However, I don't like the way that they run the Scottish government, so I will vote for Labour in the Scottish parliamentary elections. So I could vote for an SNP MP in Westminster for one set of political priorities, and I could vote for a Labour MSP in the Scottish Parliament in Holyrood for another set of political priorities. I have that choice. I do not have that choice in England. I can only vote for the MP that I want to represent me nationally, throughout the whole UK. I do not get to choose a real representative. We get local councillors, but they have almost no power. They deal with collecting the bins. Well enough, fine. A few other matters, not a lot. And when actually it comes to dealing with very serious matters, as we've seen recently, they get hamstrung by the national government anyway. So local devolution, there would absolutely be support for that. But again, it's one of those things, until you find out exactly what form it will take and you have that public debate, it's very difficult to say. Because at the moment, the debate would be, you would poll people who say, do you want a regional parliament in the north of England or the Midlands or the southeast of England or southwest of England, however you distribute it, representing, you know, for me, I would say the north of England. Do you want a north of England parliament to decide matters for the north of England? Yeah. Who's going to say no to that? There will be some, but there won't be that many, I wouldn't have thought. But if you then started to have a public debate on it and you started to have actual arguments being brought to the public view on both sides, and it started to shape, well, how is it going to shape up? What's it going to do? What powers is it going to have? You may end up finding that there are people not in favour of it. So it's very difficult to tell until that debate happens. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the future, potentially, of democracy in the UK. Quite frankly, if there's going to be a future to the UK, I think it would have to be that future. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.